Namaskaram, a very good morning to everyone, and wishes on Sharad Purnima, the auspicious full moon at the end of the Devi Paksha in the Sharad Masam. And one of the brightest moons of the year happens today. And I hope through this literature festival, the brightness of knowledge of our civilization, of our culture, of our past also illuminates all of us. A great initiative by the Verandah Club, Rajesh ji and his entire team, Jagannathan ji and others. It's not an easy task putting together a literature festival. As an organizer myself, I know it's a completely thankless job. There's always something that people find fault in. So kudos to you and your entire team for doing this. Thank you. And on a Sunday morning to talk about history and to actually be attentive about it is going to be a very difficult task, I know. So the onerous responsibility of keeping you all awake is also on me, and I realize that. But before I start, let's be candid and honest. That how many of us in this room, like history? Wow. No, the next question will probably clarify that. How many of us liked history the way it was taught to us in school? Wow. But there was one person who actually liked the way it was taught in school. I'm so glad you are in a glorious minority. To be very honest, I mean, in my own growing up days, most often in the history classes, I used to be found kneeling outside class because I don't think I could memorize who succeeded whom and which war was fought in which era and so on. The rote learning and the boring manner in which it is taught to us, unfortunately, in this country, strips away all the importance, all the relevance of this very important discipline, which as we grow up, we probably realize that it is one of the most important disciplines, the most important areas to understand ourselves as a civilization, as a nation, as a people. And maybe that's also the design that you put in so much disinterest in this subject so that no one pays much attention to it, and we don't think and ruminate about these ideas and subjects. As George Orwell had said, he who controls the past controls the future. So I think history becomes a live battlefield today in India, and most of the trouble, the discussions we have are on subjects related to the past. Sometimes when we switch on the news channels, including the ones where my dear friend Anand is fighting for 30 more seconds, we wonder if we are living in the times. I mean, Aurangzeb is contesting an election, Tipu Sultan is having a manifesto, because all our discussions are around these characters who have died several years, centuries ago. But that itself shows how important it is, our history, our story. And we may have been, politically independent today, but I think, as we all know, our minds are far from being decolonized. That very famous word, which is thrown back again and again at us, as to what decolonization actually means. And I think, I take you back to that infamous minute of Sir Thomas Macaulay, who in 1835 said, the entire goal and objective of English education is to create this vast class of interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern, who are only Indians in blood and color, but they are completely English in their tastes, opinions, morals, and intellect. And I think somewhere we have been very, very faithful adherents to Macaulay's minute, particularly in the way we look back at our own past, at our own civilization. So in this lecture, I'd like to talk about some of the fault lines that exist in the way Indian history, historiography, has evolved over the decades, particularly the decades after independence. And I'd certainly love to draw a lot of interaction and questions from all of you. In the 1880s, there was this English civil servant, Sir John Strachey, who was in charge of training all the young civil servants who came, who were part of these Indian imperial civil service. And one of the things that he was infamous to have said is that the first and the most important thing to learn about India is that there is not and there never was an India. The first and the most important thing to learn about India is that there is not and there never was an India. I think, and that becomes the first fault line when it comes to looking at our own past. Where how often do we not hear this, even among educated elite, who say, you know, we were not even a nation. We were this disparate set of people who are constantly fighting with each other, and but for the British coming over and stitching this entire setup, into one sort of a unit, we would not have been a country. And so this Indian nation itself is a very unhistorical entity, and so it doesn't have a past. And that is very similar to what is being said in this state, even about the Hindus. The Cholas were not Hindus, this one was not Hindus. There was some meme that was doing the rounds on social media that, earlier they were saying yoga is not Hindu, then they said Garba is not Hindu, then Cholas are not Hindu. By the time we come to maybe 2047, 100 years, Hindu itself will not be Hindu. So that is the level of, total self-loathing that we have tried to actively, initiate into ourselves. And the idea is very simple, that to say we had no achievements, we just existed just like that for 5,000 years or more of our long march of civilization, and that everything that came to us was external. So here it's very important to realize that while a nation state may be defined by codified laws, by territories and so on, a nation goes beyond that. A rashtra, I think nation itself is a very different kind of entity, Eurocentric definition. But a rashtra goes beyond laws, beyond sterile laws of a constitution, which gives you how to transactional business as to how do you go about your life in a day-to-day basis. But rashtra on the other side is a common allegiance, a common sense of feeling, an emotion towards a cultural and a territorial entity. And that is something that we see in the several millennia of our existence. That has been an uninterrupted flow. Right from the way we do the sankalpam itself in our pujas, an Indian is actually defining that geographical entity where they are sitting and conducting the Jambu Dvipa, Bharatavarsha, Bharatakhanda that they are talking about. That is not just something that came in any section or article of the Constitution. It's something that's part of our civilization for millennia now. Similarly, if you go back to the Mahabharata, the Bhishma Parva, it has more than 70 verses which talk in detail not only about the geographical parts of the country, but also different ethnic groups within the country, right? From Kashmir to the Dravida, Kerala, Kuntala, the Magadha, Vidarbha, every part of India as it exists today has been described in those verses of the Bhishma Parva. And what can be more evocative than what is said in the Vishnu Purana, which some people say was composed between 400 to 300 BCE, some say in the 9th century, but whatever it may be, 1,000 years at least. In that, the famous quotation of Uttaram yat samudrasya himadraschaiva dakshinam varshatad bharatam nama bharati yatra santati. The whole landmass which is south of the Himalayas and north of the oceans, vast landmass, the Varsha, the country is Bharatavarsha, and its children are called Santati, are called Bharati. So our texts have always spoken about this sense of nation and nationhood. Though we may not have been politically, the contours of no country. United Kingdom, the way it is today, would not have been how it was 500, 600, 700 years back. The US was not what it is today. So similarly, political entity, the boundaries of the country may be different, but the important part of our consciousness as a nation is that we have always thought of ourselves this way. And this common unified sense of cultural circulation, I think finds its manifestation in the best way in the manner in which Adi Shankaracharya went about his Digvijayas through the country. Starting from a small village in Kerala where he was born, there was no need for him to traverse this landmass. It was not by accident that he went across the four contours and very aptly setting up the Sarvagnya Peeth, the Sharada Peeth in Kashmir, which was the bedrock of our civilization, where all our, the scriptures, our knowledge systems evolved. And the four markings that he did from Sringeri, Puri, Badrinath to Dwarka, it literally marked the country in this quadrilateral that our nation actually was. And interestingly, he never found any opposition that, why are you entering my country, or this is not, you are an outsider, nothing like that. He traversed the entire country, which was part of his journey there. So that itself shows that, the entire, as I said, the common unified sphere of cultural circulation that always existed within this country, that is something that is so undermined, so purposely ignored all the time. The splattering of all the, Divya Kshetras that are there, that also had a meaning, a reason. 51 Shaktipeethas scattered across the country, the 12 Jyotirlingas, the 7 holy cities. All this was also not by accident, because if anyone had this parochial sense that, my part of the country is the holiest, there were 100 others who were equally holy, if not holier than yours. So I think it was a great effort or a consciousness by our ancestors to, fuse environmental consciousness with faith, with also a sense of patriotism, all of it coming together, because everything we found, from mountains to rivers to natural features to animals to animate, inanimate, everything was sacred. So environmental consciousness too was seeped into the way our faith systems operated. So in this current context of how, other than the one brave person who actually liked how history was taught in our schools, and why is it that we don't like the way Indian historiography is dealt with, is there an alternative indic version to how history needs to be presented? Because all the time we are also told this, right, from Al-Baruni, who said the Hindus don't even have any sense of history, they don't keep any accounts, which is completely bunkum, because we may not be maintaining our records, our the way in which the Western world did, in a chronological, in a linear fashion, but our records are in multiple places, on coins, on temple walls, the inscriptions. If the Brihadishwara temple in Tanjavur has the records of all the 400 Devdasis who were part of the temple worship, their names, their addresses, their emoluments, and their entire lineage, obviously somewhere we were looking at documentation to the last T. Of course, it is not the way in which the Greeks or the Romans did contemporaneously. So is there an indic alternative to what this historiography is? And to that also, someone like Kalhana, who wrote the Rajatarangini, had very evocatively stated, that dharmartha kama mokshanam upadesha samanvitam kathayuktam puravrittam itihasam tachakshmate. Kathayuktam, in a story form, puravrittam, the narratives of the past told to you in a story form, which have very importantly an upadesha component, a didactic component, a sense of moral compass for the society, which will lead you in the pursuit of the 4 purusharthas of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. That is called itihasa. Itihasa, thus it happened. So we have a very defined idea of not only what history is, what is its objective. It is not just a dry catalogue of rote learning of who succeeded whom, what war happened, but it has to be told interestingly. It has to be told in a manner that interests, excites, inspires, and also has an upadesha component which leads to a societal improvement. So the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, which are called itihasa, the Puranas, to a Western mind who was looking at it, these look like fancy tales, a lot of mythology, a lot of uh, crazy stories, but embedded within all that flourish, within all that beautiful tales, was also the kernel of what actually are chronology of the various rulers, the various dynasties, and all of that was embedded. So the first important fault line that I wish to cover was this: are we a nation? Is this a British creation? Have we not had this sense of what Bharatavarsha means and what it has traversed through these several millennia? The other sad point, and this particular thing that is denied, and there's been a continuum of this civilizational march. They may have been different matas, panthas, and so on, including Jainism, Buddhism, which again are seen from a Western eye of a Protestant kind of faiths, which went against the clergy, the Catholic clergy. So you have to create these false equivalences of the Brahminism versus Buddhism versus Jainism and so on. But the conflicts, so creating conflicts among Indic faiths when none existed, that is another super project, not only of the Marxist historians, but also of several anti-India, breaking India forces, which do not want to, first of all, make us feel self-loathing, make us feel that we didn't achieve anything, and make us also feel that we are so desperate and so broken into so many segments that we were constantly fighting with each other. Along with that also comes a complete denial or an erasure of all our achievements, be it in various fields, scientific, mathematics, alchemy, chemistry, philosophy, medicine, linguistics, each field. How often does a young child who is in an Indian school read about all this in their books? We very faithfully, have to have Shakespeare and all of them in our growing up years, and nothing wrong with that. We should take the best of everything that comes from every part of the world. But where do we even read either the originals or the translations of Kalidasa or Tiruvalluvar or Sankaradeva from Assam or different parts of India, Annamacharya and all of that? These do not form a part of our curriculum also when we talk of our own past. The other problem which I foresee in the way Indian historiography and our story is told is that the story of India is almost always seen through the eyes of her invaders. If you see even the way popular history books are, it is one after the other a litany, a long list, a laundry list of battles that we lost. Right from the Arab invasion where India lost, and there was the Battle of Tarain, Indians lost. You had the Panipat Wars, Indians lost. The Anglo-French Wars, Anglo-Maratha Wars, Anglo-Sikh Wars, Anglo-Mysore Wars, all of which were right till 1857, which again we lost. So what is the idea behind this? This is to tell us that right from that myth that was created of the Aryan invasion theory, that you as a nation are not capable of governing yourself. You as a nation are not capable enough of ruling yourself. You are always, right from your earliest ancestors, were people who came from the outside, who invaded you, who conquered you, who ruled over you, who gave you civilization, who gave you a concept of what nation is. And that continues all through. But today, if we are around as a civilization, while Greek and Rome and all the contemporaneous civilizations collapsed, there must have been some wars we won also. There must have been some bravery, some resistance that we put as well. So where are these stories in our popular discourses? Where are these stories of valor and resistance in our history books, in our textbooks, particularly for our children? And at the risk of sounding like plugging my forthcoming book, but my new book, which is to come out in a couple of weeks, called Brave Hearts of Bharat, touches exactly upon this aspect of about 15 stories of unsung heroes and heroines from different parts of India. There was resistance posed across the country to invasions all the time. There may have been occasions where we lost, but there were more occasions when we won, which is why we are around as a civilization. We've kept our faith, our languages, our religions intact, our culture intact after so many centuries of barbaric interventions in our civilization. So Lalitaditya Muktapida from Kashmir. I don't know how many of us in this country even know of this great man of the Karkota dynasty of Kashmir, who ensured that the Arabs never conquered beyond the Sindh region. They were driven away. I mean, there was no reason why Muhammad bin Qasim was just interested in that small Debal seaport in Sindh after defeating Raja Dahar. They could have expanded through the whole of India. Within a few decades of the Prophet's death, the Islamic forces had managed to conquer the whole of Syria, Persia, that entire region, and Islamize it. But how is it that they did not manage to do that in India? Lalitaditya and some of his contemporaries, Bappa Rawal, Pulakeshin, Nagabhatta, all of these people ensured that the Arabs were completely thrown out. Similarly, Rani Naiki Devi of Gujarat, in the 11th century, a Kadamba princess from Goa princess, who was married into the Chalukya dynasty, Solanki dynasty of Gujarat, who defeated Muhammad Ghori. So much so that Muhammad Ghori was so ashamed and embarrassed to be defeated by a woman that he never turned back to towards Gujarat again. Much later, it was Kutubuddin Aibak who managed to defeat the Chalukyas there. Similarly, if you come down south, from the state I come from, Rani Abbakka of the 16th century, who dealt a death blow to the Portuguese, who never managed to capture that part of coastal Karnataka, though they had established themselves in Goa by then. Marthandavarma in Kerala, who in the Battle of Kolachal defeated the Dutch East India Company to such an extent that the Dutch collapsed as a global power, and their entire idea of colonizing Bharat was completely defeated. Otherwise, we'd probably all be under the Dutch East India Company instead of the English East India Company. Given the rising power and influence of that man in any other country, Marthandavarma statues would probably be there in every city and venerated. Here, other than those in Kerala and maybe Tamil Nadu, very few people in the rest of India even know who Marthandavarma is or what that Battle of Kolachal was. But we all know the Battle of Panipat and that we lost, and all of those things are ingrained into our heads right from childhood, that you are a nation of losers. Velu Nachiyar from here, who was the first woman to lead a campaign against the British. Lachit Borphukan from Assam, who ensured that the Mughals never managed to occupy Kamrup. Now, these are stories or people, they remain unsung, unknown, because nobody bothered to talk about them. And where have these stories disappeared? Why have they disappeared, more importantly? Is it just by accident, or is it by a design that we want to instill these factors about our own past? The other point that I usually make is the extreme Delhi centricity of our historical narrative. Again, in the growing up years, we all memorized every small dynasty, the Lodhis. The Lodhis, Tughlaq, Khiljis, I mean, what was their real contribution to this country or its progress? Barring a few architectural pieces here and there, by and large, they were marauders and invaders and bigots. But we very faithfully, we are supposed to know the entire genealogy of all of them. But the Cholas, who ruled for 1,000 plus years, the Shatavahanas, south of India gets a raw deal all the time. The Shatavahanas, the Chalukyas, the Pallavas, and the Vodeyars of Mysore, the Travancore rulers, or the Northeast also, which doesn't get featured, in the way we see our history. The Ahoms ruled for 600 long years. But I don't know if we can name one Ahom king, in that long list of 600. We can't, because we've never been taught that. Similarly, the rulers of, Manipur, the Methi rulers, the Twipris from Tripura, all of these people do not feature. So when we say history of India, are these vast swathes of land not part of this nation at all? So I time and again say, I think India needs to snatch her history, her story back from Delhi. And I have nothing against Delhi; it's a beautiful city. But then this, like we have in every other aspect, the Lutyens and it's a state of mind, as they say, and not the geographical location of what that place is. It is even in the media, it's only Delhi that matters. Everything is tyranny of distance. What happens in the northeast does not, or South India does not capture the national imagination. A similar kind of narrative we see even in the way our history is narrated, and that I think needs urgent correction. In fact, I would urge you all, those who've not probably seen your children's history textbooks, most of the NCRT books are freely available for download on the internet, on the NCRT website. Story of Our Past or something it is called, in 3 volumes. If you see the 7th standard book, of the largely later ancient and early medieval India, you'd be quite shocked that the Cholas occupy half a page. The Vijayanagara Empire probably a few lines. The Marathas do not have much importance. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj only appearance is in the photograph. That's all, and a caption to that photograph saying who this person was. So imagine that a young person who's growing up, this is all that they know about all these important dynasties and personalities, whereas you have 3 chapters on the Mughals, almost one and a half chapters on the Delhi Sultanate. So I think this needs urgent course correction and a balancing, and I hope the governments are listening, or if they are not, I think it's left to individuals and civil society to actually start talking about these and create those active lobbies to ensure, because democracy is nothing but competitive lobbies which ensures that these things matter to us. The way our story, our past is told to us and our children matters to us, and that is why that needs urgent correction. Another fault line that I move to is, a complete reticence to talk about the darker elements of our past. Will Durant had called the Islamic, American historian, he called the Islamic conquest of India as one of the bloodiest stories of human history, not just Indian history, but human history, one of the bloodiest stories. But how much of that actually finds a manifestation in the way we look at our past? Probably none. And that is because we labor under the misapprehension that somehow talking about these inconvenient truths of this wounded civilization, of this bruised civilization, will somehow upset today's social setup, and so people will get upset, some groups will get upset, some community will get upset. When we talk of the British conquest, there we are freely talking about it. There we don't say talking about the British barbarities will upset the Christian community in India. But when we talk about the atrocities that we faced as a civilization through almost 800 years of Islamic conquest, there we somehow feel, and I'm being politically incorrect, we say that the Muslims of this country will feel alienated. And why should that happen? Why should a Muslim of today, a young Muslim boy or girl, the albatross of Ghazni and Ghori and Tipu Sultan and Aurangzeb and others, Timur and other bigots, does not lie on his or her shoulder? So why should we hang that on their necks and then say that they are your heroes? If you really want heroes from the same, first of all, I don't agree to that. That to ingratiate to any community or win their confidence, you need to have leaders and icons from the same community. A Muslim person in India can have a Hindu or a Jain icon as much as a Hindu can have a Muslim icon. But even if you want to have those, why are we not looking at Sant Shishunal Sharif or Kabir or Raskhan or Rahim, and we talk of syncretism and that entire give and take kind of an osmosis? Why are those people not becoming icons? Right from then to probably an APJ Abdul Kalam or Arif Muhammad Khan Saab or anyone else. We constantly want to take these demons of the past, whitewash their crimes, and present them in a manner that is palatable to today's political correctness, which is extremely, I think, dangerous. Because just to give a few numbers and statistics, At the very least, Sitaram Goyalji, in his seminal work, had spoken of about, at the minimum, 40,000 temples having been broken during the course of the just those 500 years before the fall of the Delhi Sultanate. And in the same time span, the population of the subcontinent fell by 80 million. 80 million was the reduction, and people just didn't drop down dead. There was obviously barbarities that were done to them. Sex trade, the manner in which women from the subcontinent were taken away. In fact, in Ghazni, in Afghanistan, there is supposed to be a pillar with an inscription which says "Dukhtare Hindustan, Nila mein do dinar." The Dukhtare Hindustan, the daughter Dukhtar of Hindustans, were auctioned, nilam, for 2 dinars each. Lakhs and lakhs of women who were taken away from this part of the country and sold away as sex slaves there in different parts. Unequal laws of jizya and so on, the tax that you had to pay to keep your faith, always working under surveillance, that you are not able to express yourself. Despite all that, we have overcome that and survived. So it talks something about our resilience too as a civilization, and I think that aspect needs to come out. And we really, in a conversation with Congress leader Dr. Shashi Tharoor, there was this thing where he inadvertently mentioned that the goal of history, particularly after independence, was history was marshaled for the cause of nation building, and that is why we had come out of the horrors of partition. So to make people feel good and so on, we could not talk about this, and this will upset social cohesion. But dare I say that the foundations of a country cannot really rest on the false equivalences of whitewashed history, whitewashed crime. Social cohesion cannot rest on that. And so tell the truth as is. The Truth and Reconciliation Commissions that we had in South Africa, where people faced the victim and the perpetrator faced each other in the eye and said, we forgive. Now, we cannot change these things. That Minar in Afghanistan cannot be changed. But can we just deny that? That's a double whammy, the insult of actually facing that trauma, and also the civilizational memory that we have, intergenerational memory that we have of these things, to even deny that such things never happened. These are all some, right-wing propaganda and all these things. That, I think, is a double insult, where you not only forget, but you also deny that to the future generations. And I think that needs to go. Similarly, the Inquisition in Goa, where for 200 long years, the Portuguese, the kind of atrocities that were meted out on the Hindus of Goa, that too, I think we at 75, India at 75, we can be open enough to talk about all these things without constantly fearing who is going to think what. Because as I said, a Muslim in India need not identify himself with these tyrants, and they need to be called out for what they exactly are: bigots and tyrants who leached out everything that they could out of India. Even on economic factor, we talk about how the GDP of India may have grown, with vis-a-vis the rest of the world during the heights of the Mughal Empire, because the money was obviously not sent out of India like it was during the British times. But if you see Angus Madison's book, The Economist, he talks about GDP per capita. Per person's GDP, even at the heights of the Mughal Empire or through that entire 200 to 50 years, was a constant decline. So the money was probably concentrated there, but it didn't really reach out to each and every individual. Finally, the modern period, which we get to. And there, of course, the importance of the entire freedom movement that we talk of. There too, we are presented a very, very simplistic, linear, monochromatic version of what the freedom struggle was. Like that Richard Attenborough film, frame to frame, it just goes from one, convenient episode to the other. And that also that Bollywood song of दे दी हमें आजादी, बिना खड़ग बिना ढाल, साबरमती के संत तूने कर दिया कमाल. We just, without any kind of violence, we just kept pleading that quit India, and one day the British got fed up and they just said, okay, we are going away. You pleaded too long, and so we are just so tired and we'll go. So, so in that narrative that again has been dimmed into our heads, we ignore or don't acknowledge the constant, armed rebellion, armed struggle that was there throughout. It was an unbroken chain of incidents right from 1857, the first war of Indian independence, till 1946, the naval mutiny in Bombay. We still call it mutiny, while Sepoy mutiny was what the 1857 thing was called, with Savarkar changed to the first war of Indian independence. Ideally, the naval mutiny should be called the last war of Indian independence, but anyway, till this entire period, from different parts of India, you had this uninterrupted chain of an armed struggle. Which, how does it appear in the way we read our history? It is in footnotes, and these are told to us like they are isolated incidents of bravery, where a few young men, hot-blooded young men, threw a few bombs here and there. They killed somebody, and then they got, they were hanged and so on. But that was not what it was. Throughout this journey, from 1857 till 1946, the strategy of the armed rebellion was to insurrect the British Indian Army, and to ensure that a rebellion brews within that army. At the peak of the Second World War in 1945, the strength of the Indian Army was about 2.5 million, out of which there were only 40,000 who were Europeans. The rest of them were all Indians. So the idea was, even if 1%, 5% of this vast number, 2.5 million minus 40,000, if that small number is seduced to patriotism and they can switch over and create a rebellion in the army, then the days of the British Raj are numbered. That was the belief of the armed insurrection, and they were working constantly towards that. The Ghadar party, which organized cross-continental, propaganda and efforts during the First World War, that was also aimed exactly at this. And eventually, the British were scared of such a spectre. And the way the Congress Party too was formed was as that safety wall to ensure that 1857 does not, repeat itself. A.O. Hume, who founded the Congress, the idea itself was to that Indians are, gullible enough. You just engage them in a little bit of conversation. You give them few concessions here and there, some posts and positions, judiciary, etc. They will keep quiet. You just have to mollycoddle them, assuage them. The idea was never complete independence. Whereas right from 1900, 1905, the revolutionary movement was actually talking for absolute independence for the country, while it took the Congress Party to up to 1930 to declare Purna Swaraj, and of course not live up to it, because the Gandhi-Irwin Pact was signed 1 year later, where everything was, rescinded, and you had the dominion status becoming important. So what I'm trying to say is this long, march of the alternative stories of even our freedom movement, that too we have been denied. And now slowly people are asking questions, people are asking so many, uncomfortable facts are coming out, because sunlight is the best disinfectant. It has the, unique ability to ensure that, that the more you hide, somehow these things are going to come out. And in this entire journey too, the pervasive effort to ensure that the Hindu-ness of this entire movement, how to deny that too. Though it was someone none less than Jawaharlal Nehru, who in 1935, in the Glimpses of World History, he said there's a very thin line between Indian nationalism and Hindu nationalism, because this country is the only and the natural home of the Hindus, read the Indic faiths, whereas others have other countries to go to. So despite that, the Nehruvian, the Marxist stress has been on the fact that we deny the Hindu-ness of this. So right from Dayanand Saraswati to Maharshi Aurobindo to Swami Vivekananda to Tagore to Veer Savarkar to everyone, Lala Rajpat Rai, Tilak and others, this invocation, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, who invoked our motherland in a divine feminine, manner and gave the clarion call of Vande Mataram, all of this has to be denied constantly. That the Hindu-ness of this freedom movement too is somehow subservient to the larger narrative of ahimsa, which I think is extremely detrimental to the way, once again, that we look of ourselves as a nation and a civilization. So I think these are some of the broad, fault lines that I see in the way we tell the story of our past. A famous quotation that is attributed to Voltaire says, "History is the lie that we commonly agree upon, among all of us. But when it comes to Bharat, I think even that lie eludes us because there are multiple contestations, and in this, particularly in the decades after independence, which is very sad, even in the heights of the British Raj, you had space for an alternative historiography. You had the nationalist historians like R.C. Majumdar, Jadunath Sarkar, V.K. Rajwade, so many others who constantly challenged the colonial narrative of James Mill and others who thought of us as a decadent country and civilization. To that, in Maharashtra particularly, there were lots of articles that were written by anonymous people. The first Hindu, the second Hindu, the third Hindu. That was how these articles would come anonymously, challenging everything that Mill in his history of British India wrote about, degrading this country and the civilization. So there was space for that even at the heights of colonial government. But it's a terrible irony that after independence, in a democratic India, there's been such a thraldom and suffocation in which historiography has been held hostage to ideology, particularly the Marxist, Nehruvian Marxist narrative, that no alternative voices can grow. Anybody who tries to bring up another narrative is terribly cancelled. It's a blasphemy going against the holy book. So it's really, I think time has come where these alternative voices are actively encouraged, and in that efforts like what you are all doing and forums like this and so on, I think they play a very, very important role. Yesterday, I think Sai Swarupaji and all of them were talking about publishing and so on, and how publishers today, there's an increasing space for narratives from the other part of Indian history, which was never given a chance. 10 years, 12 years ago, I don't think a penguin would have picked up my Savarkar book to publish. Today at least there is a space for people to even talk about this man. There was a time where just for tuning his poems, his Marathi poems, someone like Pandit Hridaynath Mangeshkar lost his job in the All India radio. And of course, today we talk of intolerance and all of that. But so creating complete, absent, making someone persona non grata, all that is changing today. And those are good tidings, I feel, for Indian historiography. And our history, our story needs to be told in multiple manners. Nothing in India is unitary. Everything is multiple. So how can the story of our past be unitary? How can that be monochromatic and linear? They have to be a million flowers bloom, like the man who shall not be named said. So I think that's more germane in the case of Indian history and historiography. So once again, thank you so much for being such a patient audience on a Sunday morning. I hope I've tried to cover some of the main points. I'm scared that Dr. Anand Ranganathan is raising his hand, so he has a lot of revenge to take on me, and so I'm not sure. Yeah.
Vikram, that was really masterful rendition, and
thank you.
As usual, completely suffused with facts and the correct narrative. But as usual, it was very painful to hear.
I'm sure.
The reason for that
because it was not in Tamil, which you are a scholar of.
Standard since yesterday. So the reason for that is that you gave out the facts, but what you did not give was the solution. And here I want to bring out the problem. The problem is, or let me put it this way, is the solution to this problem that we have of multiple wrong accounts that are dictated by the political dispensations that are ruling our textbooks or schools or colleges. Should education anymore be concurrent on the state list? I ask this because it is completely in the hold of the governing, dispensation of any state. For example, in Kerala, you have, Stalin and Mao eulogized people who killed 60, 65 million people of their own people. To such an extent is the brainwashing that quote unquote our own Rahul Ishwar once tweeted that we need Hindutva Shegwara, he put a pillar on Shegwara, ignoring the fact that the fellow was a monster and a mass murderer. We go to Kashmir, where the state government utilizes Sikandar, who burned
chicken.
Yes, who burned 210 kilograms of jalebi. That many Kashmiri Hindus were killed, and one jalebi who weighs 7 grams, so you can imagine. To Rajasthan, where you eulogize, Aurangzeb and Tipu to Deccan. And it's not just that, non-BJP governments are doing it. BJP governments, although correctly are talking about Hindu India or something, but they're also, wiping out a lot of facts that need to come out, for example. Maybe the truth or whatever you may say of a lot of other people who did not have the right dispensation. So, unless you are a child of an IAS officer who's transferred 40 times all around the state, I dare say you will not have a composite picture, the true picture of the history. But if you have a centralized education policy, which will have one book,
one book.
Would that be a solution? In fact, even by saying it seems very odd and not a solution because what if that one book is dictated by, again, a political ideology? So, what is the solution?
Yeah. As always, Anand's questions need more than 30 seconds to answer. No, that's a great question, Anand. And I think the first step in solving a problem is to understand that there is a problem. I think vast majority of our country lives in complete blissful ignorance, and not to blame them for anything, but it's just that these things don't matter much. We don't even see the importance of how we tell the story of our past. Is it of civilizational importance to us or our future generations? So yeah, as painful as it may be to hear these uncomfortable truths, I think the first step to solution is to acknowledge that there is a problem and not live in complete blissful ignorance or amnesia about it. The second part, it's a brilliant question, but a right question addressed to quite a wrong person here, because we also are from a country where we've had a HRD minister who said that we have not changed a single line in our history textbooks, though that is not something to be proud of, but rather ashamed of. I think today the way moving beyond the history textbooks, I think there are other avenues available for a young person. It presupposes that the textbook is the only thing that a young child consumes today, which probably was how it was when we were growing up. But today, particularly other media, social media and other multimedia things that exist, I think that tells the story in a much better way. So maybe till the time governments wake up and we are able to convince the governments of the importance of this, maybe it is to rely on books like the kind of things that all of us write, and ensure that it is read by young people too. Also use these mediums which talk to the millennials much more interestingly than probably a textbook would, and debunk some of these myths in those Instagram reels of 1 minute and 2 minutes, give out these facts, stun people to ensure that young people, to ensure that they sit up and say, hey, what was this? If we bring out just this one fact of Sikandar Butchikan and the burning of the Janeus, that itself is enough to stun people enough. Why was the Kashmir Files so powerful and successful commercially? Because it stunned people about a fact which was so recent. It was in our recent history that we're talking of 30, 40 years when whatever happened there. But we have already forgotten that, and it needed a visual medium to come and stun you in your face. So maybe that is the interim solution in the short term, till the time probably governments and bureaucrats and others wake up and say that this is important. And the onus of that too, instead of constantly blaming the governments, because I'm sure they have multiple other priorities, and changing a class 6 textbook is the last on anyone's list than dealing with Pakistan and China and this and that and so on. So till the time they wake up, I think the onus of also ensuring that our voice reaches out, having those signature campaigns, and ensuring, because that's when you lobby constructively for your cause, I think that's how in a democracy you can get the government of the day to listen to you. But few isolated people talking about it, the government also thinks that this is not a vote-worthy issue in any election. It's not going to cost us or gain us any extra mileage, and that's how most political parties think only of the next election. So I think if we are really serious about it, creating that entire national campaign, and we have more than enough mediums to do that through social media and other things today than it was maybe 20, 30 years ago, to successfully lobby for the importance of this. And once we do that and make them literally wring their hands to change this, include this in their manifestos and so on, maybe that is the only way one can change. But till that happens, maybe these things, at least the publishing industry has opened up, at least we are able to get these things out. At least we have social media which allows amplification. We have people like True Indology and others who get banned, come back in different avatars, and ensure that even senior historians who spout all kinds of nonsense, like that picture, right, of Krishna showing the moon, and then that was said by several historians that this is actually the Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, and Krishna is pointing to the Eid ka Chand and so on. And it needed a True Indology to tell them that this was actually a Rajasthani miniature, and he was showing towards going to Nanda's house or something like that. So it was so people with basic intelligence and common sense who've read things are able to also bust the most eminent historians who reigned from their ivory towers with no challenges to their authority. So I think that is those are positive things which we should use to our advantage if we are serious about this as a civil society and as intellectuals in the field. Yes, Vijay ji. Vijay ji has a.
Thanks again. I think in the bookshop, your book probably both in content and size outwits all of us. Is there any special tool? Like there are many authors in the group. Your book is full of solid facts, and you're able to quote it because I know the battles you had with the Thomases of the world. How do you organize yourself when you write a book? How do you keep all the thousands of support? Is there any special app or tool that you have?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have it. After literally 120 pages of endnotes and bibliography, as you said, I still have a case running in the Delhi High Court. So that is the challenge that one faces when one tries to dismantle existing status quo. Unfortunately, I really don't have that. I go by the traditional method of what I was taught, at least in my doctoral time, of how to organize research. Just for instance, the Savarkar book, for the first volume, just 1 month that I spent at the British Library in London and the National Archives, I managed to get 40,000 pages of documents. 40,000, And unlike in India, where it is so difficult, the bureaucracy throws you off gear when you go to the National Archives or state archives, where you have to give an application and then some fellow has to sign that, then only 10% you can photocopy. Every effort made to ensure that it is made miserable for the researcher. There you can go with your camera and take photographs. And all I was doing in that time was taking photographs of all the case documents, etc., and then retransferring it back home. And by the time I came back from London, there were about 20, 30 spiral bound volumes waiting to welcome me at home, which becomes so much easy. Now, from that vast mountain, how to find your way. Unfortunately, there is no simple solution as to how do you do that. I think it comes with the training and with some amount of practice to ensure what is important, what do you exclude, what do you include, what goes into the appendix, what comes into the main body of the text. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just one more question, because we have many sessions.
Yes.
You started.
To start that speech with two questions,
Yes.
and you get a two differential answers.
Hmm.
So I don't think we would have differentiated 20 years before.
Hmm.
So because of the great work of people like you, we are able to differentiate that. I think that's a starting point for understanding that history.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
This is the follow-up to what Sam said.
Yes.
I know that it's going to be absolutely difficult, or it's going to take about 20, 30 years or more for the people in power to change the textbooks and for all that to get accepted by state governments. At least we have a lot of education administrators, some managements which are fairly, acceptable to our idea of Bharatiya culture. Is it possible that we as a group try to organize some kind of study circles across these institutions? We have somebody nodding here in the third row saying that it's possible.
Yeah.
So by which we can create interesting content and then make it happen on a national level. So some institution might take up.
True.
Can we look at a body which can create content for that and make this happen so that it's curated and then given to them and make it more interesting for youngsters to come up, so that we have a breed of people who are more patriotic and who know the facts as well.
Perfect.
Just a suggestion.
No, in fact, that's an excellent suggestion, and there has been work already done on that from your very state. In Chennai, the Chinmaya mission has actually rewritten the history books of class 6, 7, and 8 from an indic and from a dharmic perspective, completely different from what you see of NCERT. And across, I think the RSS and the Chinmaya mission schools that are run in different parts of Tamil Nadu and in Chennai particularly, these books are in vogue. But of course, I was asking Swami Mitrananda there that and Vivek Agnihotri and I were called to launch those books about a few months back, and I was really impressed by the content, which was very refreshing, which spoke about all these other people that I mentioned, Lalita Aditya and Nike Devi and all these people. And he said, for class 9 and particularly 10 and so on, since the board exam will come, you will have to revert to your NCERT syllabus. Now, through class 8, you are learning about Aurangzeb's iconoclasm. And suddenly in class 9 or 10, you say that he actually protected more temples than he destroyed, like his famous biographer had once said, sitting in the US. Then I asked him, won't the child actually get terribly confused as to, at a 14, 15-year-old child doesn't understand so much of politics and what is going on and so on, perhaps. So he said, yeah, that is a challenge. So we have not made it. We've ensured that the content is such that it very seamlessly merges into what has to be taught in class 9 and 10. So these are the kind of battles that people who are trying to change content of our books have to face. But
groups that one is a formative 6 to 9 standard, and maybe the colleges where it's possible for us and leave
the board exams, because it's a common exam. If you have a different content, if you actually say Aurangzeb destroyed temples in the board exam, if you say that, maybe you lose marks. So
Information and